March 27th, 1973. The Dorothy Chandler Pavilion erupted in shock. Marlon Brando had just won the Oscar for Best Actor for The Godfather, but instead of him, a Native American woman named Sacheen Littlefeather stood on stage. She was refusing the award on Brando's behalf, protesting Hollywood's treatment of Native Americans. The audience booed. John Wayne had to be physically restrained from rushing the stage. But what nobody knew was that this moment wasn't just about Native American rights. It was Marlon Brando's declaration of war against the Rockefeller control of Hollywood. And it would be his last. 3 days after the Oscar ceremony, Brando received a phone call. The voice on the other end was calm, cultured, unmistakably powerful. "Marlon, you've made your point. Now it's time to remember who owns the theater you're performing in." It was David Rockefeller himself. The story of how Marlon Brando became Hollywood's greatest rebel and how the Rockefellers broke him begins in 1947. Brando arrived in Hollywood as a young method actor from Nebraska, trained by Stella Adler, burning with artistic ambition. He was different from the manufactured stars of the studio system. He was real, raw, dangerous. Too dangerous. A memo from RKO Pictures to the Rockefeller offices in 1950 read, "The Brando situation requires immediate attention. He's influencing other actors to demand script changes, reject studio decisions. He's creating a revolution." Nelson Rockefeller's response was simple. "Then we'll make him the leader of a revolution we control." The plan was brilliant. Instead of destroying Brando, they would elevate him, make him the biggest star in Hollywood, give him the illusion of power, and then when he was too deep to escape, reveal who really held the strings. A Streetcar Named Desire in 1951 wasn't just Brando's breakthrough, it was his recruitment. The film was financed through shell companies connected to Rockefeller interests. Brando never knew that his rebellion was being funded by the very system he thought he was fighting. Elia Kazan, who directed Brando in Streetcar and later on The Waterfront, left behind a confession in his private papers, discovered after his death in 2003. "They told me to guide Marlon, to make him feel like he was changing cinema. But every revolutionary move he made was choreographed from above. I was his handler. I'm not proud of it." By 1954, Brando was the biggest star in Hollywood. On The Waterfront swept the Oscars. He thought he had beaten the system. In reality, he had become its most valuable asset, the rebel who made rebellion marketable. But then Brando started asking questions. Why did certain scripts get greenlit while others disappeared? Why did some actors suddenly vanish from Hollywood? Who really owned the studios? In 1959, Brando did something unprecedented. He formed his own production company, Pennebaker Productions. He would control his own destiny. Or so he thought. What he didn't know was that his business manager, Walter Seltzer, was reporting every decision to the Rockefeller offices. The first Pennebaker production, One-Eyed Jacks, was Brando's attempt to create pure art. He directed, starred, and controlled every aspect. The film went massively over budget. Suddenly, Brando found his finances frozen, his credit destroyed. The message was clear. Play by our rules, or don't play at all. A broken Brando returned to the studio system, but he was different now. Difficult, destructive. His behavior on sets became legendary, showing up late, refusing to learn lines, gaining weight for roles that required him to be fit. Everyone thought he had lost his mind. In reality, it was his only form of protest left. Then came The Godfather. In 1971, Paramount was in financial trouble. The Rockefeller interests that secretly controlled the studio needed a hit. They also needed to remind Brando who was in charge. The solution was elegant. Cast Brando as Vito Corleone, a powerful man who controlled an empire through violence and intimidation. Let him play the very type of power he was fighting against. Brando initially refused. Then his son Christian was arrested on drug charges. Suddenly, miraculously, the charges were dropped. The next day, Brando signed for The Godfather. During filming, Director Francis Ford Coppola noticed something strange. Brando would receive phone calls that would leave him shaken. "They're watching," he once told Coppola. "Who?" Coppola asked. "The real Godfathers," Brando replied. The Godfather was a massive success. But for Brando, it was a prison. He had played a monster and made him sympathetic. He had glorified the very power structure he despised. The Rockefellers had turned his own talent against him. The Oscar refusal in 1973 was Brando's last attempt at defiance. By sending Littlefeather, he was saying, "I reject your awards, your system, your control." But the response was swift and brutal. Within a year, Brando found himself effectively blacklisted. Not officially, that would be too obvious. But suddenly, insurance companies wouldn't cover him. Directors found him difficult to work with. Studios discovered scheduling conflicts. The only role he could get was in Last Tango in Paris, a film so controversial it destroyed what remained of his reputation. The rape scene, which Brando later admitted, made him feel complicit in something terrible, was, according to some sources, insisted upon by shadowy financiers. Brando spent the rest of his life apologizing for it. By 1976, Brando was broken, overweight, reclusive, taking any role for money. Superman paid him $3.7 million for 2 weeks of work. Apocalypse Now was shot around his inability to remember lines. The Revolutionary had become a parody of himself. But the most tragic part came in 1990. Brando's son Christian shot and killed Dag Drolet, the boyfriend of Brando's daughter Cheyenne. During the trial, Christian's lawyer revealed something shocking. Christian claimed his father had told him about powerful people who had destroyed their family as punishment for Marlon's defiance. Cheyenne committed suicide in 1995. She left a note, "The sins of the father are visited upon the children. Daddy fought monsters, and the monsters won." In his final years, Brando gave a series of recorded interviews to a friend, with instructions they be released after his death. The Rockefellers owned Hollywood, like they owned everything else. We were all dancing monkeys. The only difference was, I knew I was dancing. The others thought they were artists. The Godfather, that was their joke. They made me play them, and everyone loved it. They turned my rebellion into their product. You want to know the truth about Hollywood? Every star you love is owned. Every movie you watch is propaganda. Every dream they sell you is designed to keep you sleeping. And the worst part, I helped them perfect the system. I was their greatest creation. The rebel who made rebellion safe. Brando died on July 1st, 2004. His last words, according to his nurse, "I could have been a contender. Instead, I was a product." At his funeral, a strange figure appeared. An elderly man in an expensive suit, who signed the guest book simply as Dr. He stayed for 5 minutes, whispered something to the closed casket, and left. The Brando estate was settled with unusual speed. His assets were liquidated. His personal papers disappeared. The recordings he made were never found. Officially, they never existed. But one recording survived, hidden by the friend Brando had trusted. In it, Brando describes a meeting in 1999 with an aging David Rockefeller. "He came to see me on the island. Just him and me. He said, 'Marlon, you were our greatest success and our greatest failure. You showed us that even rebellion could be commodified. You taught us that there's no revolution that can't be branded and sold back to the revolutionaries. You thought you were fighting us. You were teaching us, and for that I thank you.'" I asked him why he was telling me this. He smiled and said, "Because no one will believe you. Even if you told them everything, they'd think it was just another performance. That's the beauty of what we built, Marlon. The truth itself has become unbelievable.